All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our latest podcast of ATACS, Adults Talk About Cool Thing. This is episode 22. Today is September the 23rd. This is Saturday. And joining us today, I am standing in for our usual host, Paul. This is Ryan speaking. He and some of our regulars are doing adult things today, like weddings and tennis and all kinds of stuff. So we've got a small panel today. In addition to me, we've got Nate from Wendell.
Yeah,
Wendell.
You got them all.
Okay, it's one of those. Wendell, North Carolina.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And we also have Will from Greenville, North Carolina.
There you go. You got them.
It's one of the greens. It's one of the greens.
Is it Greenville or Greenville? Either one. I'll go with either one. Okay. You know,
it's something in that shade. It's not blue or red. I know that.
Yeah. It's greenish.
Yeah, and I'm Ryan from Brooklyn, New York. So we'll be kicking off with our usual games today. Probably not going to talk about any news. We'll just and we're not really going to have a host or anything. So we'll just kick it off.
Just jump right in.
Yeah. So Nate, I saw you've been playing some Hollow Knight. I've been playing some Hollow Knight.
Yeah, I saw you were playing. We were playing it at the same time the other day.
How is Hollow Knight treating you? How far along into it are you?
I think I've played coming up on about 10-ish hours of playtime. I don't really have a good judge for how far into the game I am, because I don't really know how long it is, or how many areas there are, or how many bosses, or anything like that. I've just kind of been going in, blindly poking my way around, and getting lost a lot.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, I was kind of curious on your take of it, because so far I've been playing it, and I know, when Flex talked about it, he felt like it was a bit revolutionary, but so far it feels like a very, very well polished Metroidvania, leaning hard on the Metroid side. So, like, I find myself like, oh, here's this, here's a dead end, but I bet if I had a wall jump, I could get through it. Or, here's the secret, but this breakable looking floor, like, I bet there's a power I need to get to, a lot of running into walls, running into dead ends, and like backtracking, like, oh, which corner did I not explore to find like the power that I need to continue? So not that it's a bad game by any means. It's just that that's very Metroid-y stuff. Like, and it can be tedious.
I definitely don't think it's a bad game. I think it's really, really well made. But I have, and it sounds like you have some of the same problems that I do, but just in general, for me, I have like a terrible sense of direction. And for some reason, it's way worse in 2D games. I can move around 3D games way easier, because something about that in my brain just works better. I'm not really sure. But in a 2D game that is sort of a maze like this game, like Hollow Knight is, I get lost so easily. And the huge checklist of, like you were saying, just the roadblocks you come up on, and it's like, well, I'm going to need to come back to this at some point. Like, I lose my memory of where all those places are and what's required of them after about, like, 2. So, I cannot hold all that stuff in my brain. So it's just a lot of me running around and being like, I think I've been here before. I don't know. Why did I not go through here the first time? Oh, that's right. I remember this now. And then go do that again 10 more times until I find the next place I'm supposed to be going.
Yeah. That, I would say spatial awareness and memorization are two things. Like, I can do them, but I really have to concentrate on them. And when I'm playing games, a lot of times I'm just kind of along for the ride. So
but I do really like the combat in that game. I think it's really snappy. It feels good. I like the distance on like the sword swings and the jumps. Like, everything's very responsive. Enemy patterns are fun to memorize, especially the bosses. So I've been really enjoying that part of the game.
I'm looking forward to seeing more of it, and I found a few areas. Like I just found the City of Tears, and I really like the kind of the theme they've set up on that section of the game. Like the music and the visuals in that area are really nice. And yeah, I mean, whenever it's opened up and you're exploring and finding new things, that's pretty fun. But I know early on, it was like I needed to get like a dash or something like that. And I explored every wrong corner and had to backtrack about, 50 different times from one end to the other until I found, here's this one section that's not closed off to me that I happened to miss or I didn't go up or whatever.
Yeah, totally.
So anyway,
I think that's like, it's something that I think a lot of people like about those types of games, and I'm not saying I hate it, but it makes it hard for me to make a lot of forward progress quickly, because I'll play it for half an hour and then be like, I don't feel like looking anymore, and then I'll go do something else.
Yeah, and the other thing too about it that's a little frustrating to me is that when you've seen it before, like when you see, okay, I need a wall jump, I need a missile or a down smash or whatever it is that's going to break open this barrier, like it's very obvious in like an almost annoying way.
Yeah, you're kind of right about that.
I think, just in the limited time I've played, I think that was something that Axiom Verge hid a little bit better, because
I was actually about to bring that up too.
Yeah, so we'll see where it lands after I finish Hollow Knight, because I do like some of the themes and stuff, but I remember really liking Axiom Verge because I guess it was that same kind of experience, but it was less obvious, like where I could and could not go.
It was, and what I remember about that in Axiom Verge was that the abilities were so much like weirder and unique to that game than your standard like wall jump and ground pound stuff that you were talking about. So it's like you didn't see those points before you knew what the abilities were. It was just like, I don't know, there's something over there. I don't know how I'm going to get there. Or it was just like your abilities open up paths that you couldn't even see early on.
Yeah, exactly. Like you'd run into a dead end that would just look like a funny looking wall or something like that. And turns out that you would get something that would just completely...
Yeah. I think that was a little more satisfying in Axiom Verge, but I like playing Hollow Knight a lot better than I liked Axiom Verge for that. So, some pros and cons, I guess, on that one.
So yeah, well, anything else you've been playing? Why don't you take it away?
Oh yeah, I didn't ask. How far into Hollow Knight are you?
Probably about the same, about 10-ish hours, give or take.
Yeah. And what's funny about that, I guess, is that 10 hours I feel like could be wildly different, like depth into that game for different people, because I spend so much time not making any progress. But anyway,
I got stuck for a good long time. Yeah, so who knows?
I've been to the City of Tears that you were talking about, and I've opened up a couple of other areas since then, and just like the sheer size of the world at this point is such that like making my way around to all the exits that I don't remember why I couldn't go through them is just like a long process.
Yeah.
But anyway, we can stop talking about Hollow Knight now. I like that game. It's not 100% made for me, which is fine. It's made for people who are more in that mindset of like exploring and having good spatial awareness. But
yeah, I've been thinking about it the whole time you guys have been talking, because it's really like a genre that like it's one of those keywords that kind of turns me off, So if someone says it's like a Metroidvania or whatever, then I'm basically gonna immediately kind of say, well, okay, not gonna go in that direction,
right?
And and I guess trying to figure out exactly why that might be, and I think, like you say, with the sense of progress, that's one of the reasons that I think I sometimes gravitate towards first-person shooters and third-person action games sometimes, is because there's a very clear sense of progression, especially with the modern autosave system. It's like you couldn't go back if you wanted to.
Yeah, there's no way to lose anything. You're always going to gain.
Yeah, and so I don't know if it's that or part of it is that whole kind of spatial awareness piece. But of course, the idea of doing that, I think, services this idea of creating like a memorable space that people kind of traverse, and so, part of it, when I think about those types of games, it's like, if the space is very deliberately constructed and it's the type of thing that you get kind of familiar with, like I almost wonder if it would be interesting to think or talk about those games, maybe even in the same way that sometimes you think about like a GTA game.
Yeah.
Like when you first start, you've got, and I guess like the abilities that you're locking could be considered to, as analogous to knowledge of the city and how you get around. Maybe if there's a shortcut or an alley that you can take or something like that. And the games, even though I haven't dug into the most recent GTA, they usually do have a pretty strong sense of place. Like this is that part of town.
Totally.
And so, I wonder if that's part of the appeal. I guess the question for you guys, because it sounds like you guys are into, that's something that maybe pulls you towards a game if you hear it's a Metroidvania, rather than pushes you away. I guess, is there something about the genre, or was it just that you heard Hollow Knight was good? And you just
that's what it was for me.
Okay.
I typically like those games fine, but I do get frustrated with getting lost a lot sometimes with them. Well, not really frustrated. It's just, like I said, it keeps me from making a lot of progress, because I'll put it aside when I start feeling myself kind of spinning my wheels.
Right.
But yeah, I just basically picked this one up because I knew it was really good, or I had heard it was really good.
Okay.
Yeah, and the open world analogy is actually a good one. I was reading an article that talks about the influence of Metroid on games like, even 3D games like Dark Souls and open world games.
Yes.
But also Metroidvania is really broad as a genre definition. So like some of the games like Hollow Knight and Axiom Verge are going to be more probably Metroid-ish, and they're going to be very heavy like on atmosphere and exploration, and there are definitely some appeals. Like I like some atmosphere and exploration. Actually, it can be a really exciting thing, but for me, like exploration is a gameplay mechanic, especially when you have familiar kind of locks and keys. Like Nate and I were discussing, that can be a little tedious, but I also like 2D platforming and combat. So one game I liked a lot that's kind of called a Metroidvania, but again, this kind of gets into the fuzziness of the definition, was Valda's Story. And that game is really probably a lot more focused on combat than exploration. So you have like almost like a beat 'em up style combo system and a lot of boss fights.
You make a good point. I mean, like, because in some ways, like, I was just thinking about it, like, A Link to the Past could be considered a little bit Metroidvania when you think about it. The fact that you're getting these different abilities that let you go to these different places that you couldn't go, and there is the backtracking element to it. And, I don't know. It's interesting to think about just how wide that term could be applied, or widely that term could be applied.
Yeah, for sure. It kind of means whatever you want it to mean out of those franchises.
Yeah, usually the 2D platformer-ish aspects are pretty standard, but outside of that, I mean, I guess there's probably something about like an explorable world map, locks and keys, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I kind of think of like gating in that sense, that lock and key sense, and backtracking. That's usually what comes to mind when I think about when someone says it's a Metroidvania. I'm like, okay, so there's going to be backtracking, and I'm going to have to acquire abilities.
You're not wrong.
And I'm going to have to acquire abilities that I need to use to get places that I'll see, and then wonder what I need to do and try and remember where they are, or whatever.
Totally.
Sweet.
Yeah, those are totally staples of that.
Very common.
Yeah.
But I think it is, to both of your earlier points, that it is like another staple of that genre, that the game puts a big focus on exploring the space as a mechanic and as a progression meter for the player themselves, right? So learning the world is one of the key skills that you gain the more you play. And they don't really measure that for you, but you feel it as you play, and you kind of are just able to maneuver between point A and point B more quickly the more you play.
Yeah. It sounds like, you and I, Nate, are also both into bathroom scroungers.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting to think about that genre of game as an alternate way of creating an appreciation for the world too.
Yeah,
totally. Because if you're looking in every nook and cranny, or your game is kind of even survival horror-ish, where you need to scrounge everything in order to survive, then in some ways you're creating an awareness and appreciation of the space in the game in that way as well.
Yeah, totally.
Just thinking about it.
And BioShock is like, the quintessential example of that everybody's familiar with, and it's a more linear version of that, I would say. Like, you don't do a lot of backtracking. But I also talked about Prey earlier this year, which is a recent example of that does have a lot of backtracking, but I don't know. I think that's one of the examples I could probably point to of, like, that's a 3D game, and I never got lost, even though you're exploring this big space station and having to go every which way across it. For some reason, in Hollow Knight, I get lost every other screen. I'm just like, where am I again? I don't know. So I haven't figured out what the issue is there, but it's something with me, I'm pretty sure.
Right.
Matt, well, please help me.
Hopefully nothing has changed in your brain between those two games.
No, this is a long-running problem with 2D exploration games for me.
Gotcha.
But anyway, speaking, gonna segue based on a line from like 5 minutes ago. Will, you said you don't really tend to like those games, and you tend to like more modern shooters and action games. We've both been playing a very modern shooter action game.
Yeah, that's true. We have.
Tell me what how you've been feeling about Destiny 2.
Well, it's a weird situation, because I guess at the end of the first one, I basically said to myself, well, I like this, I think this game feels good.
Yes.
And it's fun to play with my friends. And I guess I began to feel a little cheated. I think what I mentioned the first time I talked about Destiny on here, when I was only a couple hours in, was that basically I didn't like the fact that I felt like not all playtime is created equal, like your weeklies and your dailies, those are going to give you outsized rewards compared to the other time you spend in the game after you've completed those. And that sort of thing bugs me as someone who feels like today on a Saturday, I can get in a huge amount of gaming time. Whereas on a weeknight, I can get in like 2 hours,
right?
Or something. So I guess I feel like if I were to play Destiny today and I did the weeklies and the dailies, like it would probably take me like an hour or something, or an hour and a half,
a couple hours maybe.
Yeah. And I guess basically it's kind of caused a little bit of a rift between my play group and me because of the way that I'm trying to play it. Basically what I'm trying to do is play through the campaign, play all of the story stuff one time. Yeah. And then hopefully what my hope is, and at this point I've done the campaign, all the adventures, most of there are these special quests that kind of lead you to unique weapons or something. I've done a good number of those. But I don't do very many public events because I think they're kind of stupid. I don't do many patrols because I think they're kind of stupid. I do want to see all of the strikes once, but that's difficult because you can only pick them at random. Like it just gives you a random one.
You just enter a playlist and it'll just serve them up to you one after another out of a random bucket.
Right. And so for me, not really wanting to play anything twice, I guess, I don't know if it's some line I drew in the sand, but
it's just I'm not going to repeat content in this game.
Yeah. That's basically what I said.
Well, I said, based on the first Destiny, I don't blame you.
Yeah. And so that's kind of what I've said, but I finished, now I think I'm at 256, maybe light level. And I think it's weird. One screen in the game tells you need to be 260 before the raid unlocks, but then when you actually mouse over the raid itself, it says it wants you to be 270.
Yeah, I think one of those is a minimum requirement and one is recommended. So it's we won't let you try it unless you're 260.
Yeah. And then of course, 270. Yeah, and if you're underneath, it you lose 1% of your damage. So it's not even you could like play better. I mean, you're getting like strict penalties, and so it's almost
you could
like
play better, but yes, it is just straight up debuffing you,
right,
buffing enemies.
And so, I've got a couple people who are like, I think Tim, who I play with, has gotten pretty frustrated. He's like, don't play, or you're like, I don't know why anybody would play Destiny if they're not going to go like all in, if you're not going to really get on the treadmill. And I don't know. I guess for me, it's like I've enjoyed playing it, and I actually I'm not a huge fan of the raids anyway. And I guess you'd think I would be, but because I am into co-op gaming as much, but I think first of all, like for me, like I like 2 players because I just feel like I can coordinate things better, and the raid is 6.
Yeah, that's kind of too many,
and it's usually somebody that I don't know. And then the way they do these raids, it reminds me of like one of these Call of Duty zombie modes where you just wander in there and you have to figure out like what the objective is, like what little thing you need to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess like for some people who have, I don't know, they really like this organic, I don't know how to really describe it, but this sort of learning process of like figuring out what you need to do during each side. Like how do you make the jump, and how do you drop his shield, and where do you need to go so that this happens and that happens.
Yeah.
And it was funny because the group of people that I'm playing with tried the raid, and then they sat there and did it like for 3 hours, made basically zero progress because it wasn't well established. And one of them had the bright idea to say, let's go into it blind, guys. It'll be fun. And they played it for like 3.5 hours and didn't make any progress. And then I was on the text chain, and I got a text the next day that was like, okay, guys, so let's look up how to do this. Yeah. And so I don't know. I guess I'm enjoying it, but I think I'm frustrating the people that I'm playing with because they want me to do the nightfall with them and you go do the public events. And, even when we're not playing together, they're on there doing patrols and stuff and trying to grind out their light level. And I'm spending all that time playing Horizon, which is much more fun.
There you go.
So that's kind of where I am with it. So, I mean, I'm enjoying myself. I thought it's kind of, there's some interesting ideas in it and little fun things. It's a lot of refinement. I wouldn't say there's a whole lot that totally, blows my mind, or anything like that. But yeah, I'm playing a warlock, and I'm using the lightning power, which is pretty fun. Basically, his what do you call it? I guess unique or special power. It's kind of like Emperor Palpatine from Star Wars.
Yep.
And so, but yeah, so that's kind of where I am with it. I don't really have a lot of thoughts on it. It's interesting because the reviews for it have been much better.
Yeah. And I think it is a better game than the first one. And pretty much on all fronts.
And I also think, and this is probably the last thing I'll say about it, is when I think about Destiny, I think that it's a good game, but it's not a game for me. If you guys probably saw, I posted, and this I don't know if this is technically news, but there was an article where Square Enix had said, hey, we like this idea of games as service, and we think that this is going to be the future of games, and we're going to start kind of pushing for this model with all of our games, our franchises. And I think that like at a certain time, like if I was younger and I didn't have as much money to buy the games I want to buy, like I could only afford maybe one game every couple months or something, I had tons of free time, Destiny would be absolutely perfect. In the same way that at that time in my life, Diablo 2 was perfect.
Right.
Because I couldn't buy a lot of games, but once I got Diablo 2, I could do runs and runs and runs and make other classes and make other guys. Although I would argue that the ability to create something unique is a lot harder in Destiny. I pretty much all the hunters ideally play the same way. All the warlocks ideally play the same way. So there's a lot.
And even between classes, there's only minor differences.
And so I don't know that I would even compare it to Diablo 2. No. But in terms of the gaming role that it kind of fills, I just feel like I'm not there right now. Like I have a limited amount of time, and I want to see as many things as possible. I don't want to do the same crap over and over and over and over again.
Yeah. So, you're 100% right that it is a style, and all games as service kind of do this. Destiny definitely doubles down on it. The style of, this is the game that you can just sit down and play, and there's always a bunch of stuff for you to do, even if it's repeating content. You're just going to keep those progress bars chugging.
Right.
And yeah, it's good for people who have more time than money. That's exactly like you said.
Yeah, but that's most of what I have to say about it, I guess.
Yeah.
How about you? How are you thinking?
It sounds like we're in pretty similar positions. I'm in the upper 260s on power level, so I'm able to do the raid, but of course I don't have a group that I play with, so I've actually played pretty much everything solo.
Gotcha.
And yeah, I do generally like the game. I think it's an improvement on the first one for sure in most ways. Although, depending on who you ask, that may or may not be a very high bar. But I think it is pretty solid overall. There's a ton of stuff to do. I think it's interesting that your line in the sand is not repeating content, because that's kind of like what they built this game around, was hey, do everything a bunch of times.
Yeah. Well, I've put a decent amount of time in it, and I haven't repeated anything yet.
I think there is enough stuff that you can totally not repeat anything and get 20 or plus hours out of it. Of good stuff, and it's just a good shooter first and foremost. So it's fun to play. I don't think the campaign is amazing or anything. I think it's totally
better than the first.
Yeah, it's better than the first, which is an extremely low bar. So it's just this is a mediocre, very boilerplate video game storyline, right? Introduce bad guy does bad thing, get revenge on bad guy. Okay, we're done.
Yeah, but there aren't a lot of
That's great.
co-op first-person shooters that you can play through the campaign. And so in some ways, I'm just that. So it's meeting,
and it's a very good shooter. So I'm not knocking it for that at all. That's just it is what it is.
Yeah.
And then the grind that starts after you finish the campaign is you're either gonna get on that treadmill and grind it out, or you're not. And I think either way is fine. Mm-hmm. I've been kind of just poking at it and trying out different things, and have definitely realized that the way to get loot in that game, at least when you get to 250 power level, which is the average level of all your items, if anybody doesn't know. Once you get to that area, you just kind of want to run around and do those public events that are really silly. Just hey, I'm going to walk around on this map and bounce between public events, and this one you fight a tank that drops out of the sky, and this one you defend a point for 2 minutes, and then this one you have to go kill this big bad guy. And it's just kind of, it's that rinse and repeat content, but that's the fastest way that I've found to get upgrades, basically.
Right.
Which is mildly disappointing, I think. I think the promise of what Destiny is or could be is that they give you 5 or more different options of things you could be doing. You could do strikes, or you could do Crucible, or you could do public events, or you could keep doing adventures, or wait for weekly challenges, or try the raid. And in an ideal world, all of those things would be equally viable, right?
Right.
But I don't think that it's quite balanced that way, at least not right now.
Mm-hmm. No, I can agree with that.
But yeah, I mean, general thoughts, I guess, are that I still think it's a good shooter, and I think that game has a really pretty strong visual aesthetic that I still enjoy. Mm-hmm. Guys' heads pop off real good when you shoot them.
Yeah, those Cabal guys, you shoot them and they're they lose their air pressure. It's
shooting those dumb fat Cabal troopers in the face as they slowly jetpack up towards you is never not satisfying. They're just I'm coming to get you. Oh, my mask.
That's it. That's you nailed it.
Yep.
You nailed it.
But yeah, it's a pretty good time. I don't honestly know how much more time I'll put into it. If I can find people to do the raid with, I'll probably try it. But other than that, I don't really know.
Got to go look up the instructions.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like you guys have kind of, set a fairly healthy playing cycle for a game like Destiny. I was pretty heavily invested in the first game for an expansion or two, and played the beta. I was sort of on the hype train, and I made it was a fairly close decision to not jump into Destiny 2, and I'm not regretting it based on what I've heard so far.
Yeah, it's definitely not going to change anybody's mind whether you liked or disliked the first one. But
right.
It's pretty fun overall. That's about all I have to say about it.
Yeah.
The only other game I've been playing is the Mario plus Rabbids. I don't know if you guys have any interest in that.
So I'm curious about this, and I think Flex has talked about it a little bit. But I heard like I think Jeff Gersman was saying that there were some issues he had with the game, and he felt like he was actually enjoying it less as he played it. I was wondering where you were sitting. Like,
I haven't gotten super far into it, but I'm like halfway through World 2, and I think there are 4 or 5 worlds, so I'm not super far in yet, and I'm generally still enjoying it, but I don't play it a lot, I guess. I'll pick it up and do like a fight or two, and then won't play it for 2 days. And that's not because I don't enjoy it, it's just because I've got other stuff I'm playing, so I just haven't put a ton of time into it.
Okay, cool, yeah. And I'll be curious to hear, like, as you and Flex kind of wrap that game up. That's a game I've had my eye on for when I hopefully get a Switch later on, but I kind of want to see how it lands because, there are definitely some other good turn-based strategy games. Like, I'm still playing Fire Emblem Echoes.
I do really like it as sort of a take on the XCOM formula. The thing that I enjoy most about that game is just the movement options that your characters have. It's just like, it's super fun to have a character do a dash attack through an enemy to deal some damage to them, move like halfway across the map, jump off of an ally, and then like bounce off the head of another enemy, and you just like make your way across the whole map in one move, which is pretty cool.
That sounds like a lot of movement compared to most turn-based strategy games too. Like,
I would say that's the focus of the game for sure, is just moving your characters around.
You have your 5 to 10 squares. You can move, maybe make an attack somewhere in that range, and then that's it. Yeah.
This one's definitely way more movement focused than something like the recent XCOM games, from what I've played. But yeah, that's pretty much it for me.
Yeah. Well, I guess I could touch on Horizon for a second. Because I kind of mentioned it there for a minute as the thing that I'm doing instead of grinding on Destiny.
Yeah, I'm curious what you think of that.
And I think I'm kind of enjoying it, really. I mean, there's I think it's interesting in terms of like the pace at which you kind of unlock things. It seems like, I guess, and maybe this is just the open world thing, but it's like the first vendor I remember seeing was selling like all these different weapons. It was like he was like selling rope casters and rattlers and one type of bow, and then a lob sling, and then a different type of sling, and then like these 5 different types of armor. And I was kind of like, whoa, guys, like, maybe you could give this to me a little slower. It kind of reminded me of, I actually felt a little bit that way about like, The Witcher. It kind of throws a lot at you at the beginning. I remember The Witcher 2, like, oh my goodness. It was like, here's all the signs. Here's your different types of attacks. Here's your blocks, your dodge. Get out there, buddy. Go hunt. And I was kind of like, whoa, now, hang on. Let me figure out my buttons. But so it was a lot, and it's also, you can stumble on some really hard stuff in that game too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like there's technically like one. I mean, there are like, the monster grounds, where this is where you'll find this type of monster, and this is where you'll find, or not monster, but robot or whatever. I guess monster robot. We could keep going.
Monster robots.
Yeah.
Dinosaur.
Find this type, but you can stumble into really hard dudes like all the time. So so that's
especially early game. That game can be pretty harrowing for your like underpowered Aloy.
Yeah, and there was one part I was feeling pretty rough. I think it was like when I almost got to Meridian, or it was on the way to Meridian. Like at that point, and luckily, and I don't know if this had anything to do with that. That's funny. I don't think this had anything to do with the way the game was introduced. But I don't know if you guys remember. I wrote in the channel the issue that I had with the game, which was actually where I didn't realize at first that whenever you shot an enemy with an elemental effect, that little bubble.
Oh, right. I remember this now. Yeah.
And then you have to fill that bubble up to actually afflict the enemy with the effect. And it took me like hours to figure that out. Like I didn't actually get it until they showed me a tooltip. And it could have been that there was just too big of a break between when I first started the game and maybe they told me that.
Yeah, I don't remember if they explicitly tell you that, but essentially what you were doing is you were starting the process of assigning an elemental effect to something and thought that you had done it, but you weren't actually doing it.
And so basically it was almost like, you started the process of lighting this guy on fire, and then I thought he was already on fire, and I don't want to waste air. So I wasn't like, I don't want to shoot another fire arrow at him.
Yeah,
so
why would you?
I was like walking around watching him burn, and I was just getting stomped on, and so that was a tough time. But then once I kind of figured that out, it's been pretty good. One interesting thing about the game is I think that the architecture is done really well.
Oh, yeah.
And I guess part of what I mean by that is like, although there are things that are like highlighted yellow, where they're like, this is where you need to climb. Some of the ruins are actually, it's just a mess in there. And, and so when you're jumping through it, like it does not look like a space that's been created for your character. Which doesn't stand out to some people, but it certainly stood out to me. It's like, wow, how interesting, like, and so there were a lot of times it was like, well, I think I can jump through that window, but I mean, I don't know. It looks like it's about my size. And then I'd go over there and I'd kind of be able to jump through it, but it wasn't like, I guess it didn't feel as scripted or created for me, which is kind of a neat thing. In comparison to the games where it's like, well, here's where you'd grab if you jumped over there.
Right. Yeah, their environments are really impressive, both, in their detail and just the technical level of the visuals, but also
I think you cut out for a minute.
Oh. Yeah, I don't remember it specifically for the dungeons, but I do remember that as like, possibly an underrated detail about that game is that just every bit of the design, like the character costumes, like the personalities, the cities, like the stuff that they use, like they've created like these different tribes with their different like kind of cultures, and they've done it in incredible detail.
Yeah, and so I mean, now I guess I'm having fun just usually getting on there and trying to get a component. I kind of do wish that sometimes the monsters would actually drop the component that you're looking for, because sometimes, oh man, like I killed the my second Thunderjaw this morning, and he didn't drop a crystal braiding, which is his sort of element that you need to get stuff. And man, that was a tough break, because those guys take a while. And then I had to get a bellowback heart. Those are the guys who have like the huge tank on their back, and they throw fire at you. And I killed two of them at once, and neither one dropped the bellowback heart that I needed. And I was like, come on.
I remember a little bit of that. Yeah.
But it's not too bad. I mean, they give you tons of experience and components and stuff anyway, but it's kind of like, come on. And there wasn't another bellowback in the area, so I got to go find another one to get whomped on. But I'm having a good time. The one weird thing is that, like, I remember Flex saying to me at one point, he said, this is he said, well, it's a really long game. Like, this is a really long game. And then I heard my friend Tim say basically the same sort of thing. Like, this is a really long game. And so I guess it's been, kind of a weird thing is that, like, I've been enjoying it thus far, but I'm worried that there may be a time here in the near future where I'm like, wow, is it going to slow down, or am I going to get tired of it, or does the story going to drag on? I don't know if you guys or you, Ryan, felt that way at all about it, but
I mean, I would say yes and no, like in the sense that so I got the platinum trophy in 50 hours, which I think by open world game standards is not extraordinarily long. Like,
right,
you look at like The Witcher, or I don't know.
Well, yeah, you look at The Witcher.
Or,
you've been looking at The Witcher for a while. Yeah.
Or a Bethesda game, like that's not, and that's platinum trophy too. Like I could have probably cut 15 hours of content out. I would say if you mainline that game, you could probably do it in 20, 30 hours. Like, and that's also not a super long game by open world standards. But I did feel like, doing all those collectibles and stuff like that, it did start to drag. And I think depending on how you balance the story and the open world progression, you can definitely see the game start to drag.
I'd like to do the cauldrons because I've heard those are really good. I did the first one. I thought that was a lot of fun. And then for, I guess, people listening, the cauldrons are like these sort of really tech-looking dungeons. So the world outside is very overgrown and verdant, and then you go into these dungeons that are almost like cyber-looking dungeons. And
they're like futuristic factories, right?
Yeah, and I also and I think it's just some part of me that loves like stealth action games. Like, I love doing the bandit camps for some reason. That's my thing. But in terms of like the flowers, the metal flowers, or the relics, or even the hunting grounds, or the vistas and the hunting grounds, I don't know. The hunting grounds I've heard give you a lot of experience, but I tried some of them and I didn't really think they were all that much fun. But so I guess right now my plan is to I'm still doing all the quests and errands and main quest, but in terms of side content, I'll probably just try and do all of the hunting grounds and the cauldrons.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what that'll end up putting my playtime at, but that's kind of where I am with it.
There are only 5 or 6 cauldrons. There aren't a ton of cauldrons, I think.
5, yeah.
So I don't think you'll be in bad shape there. I remember
for a minute, Nate.
I had some internet troubles, so I missed a little bit of it. But.
The one question I did have, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, Ryan. I guess I was saying, did the game feel at all like it dragged for you towards the end? Because I guess I had 2 different people exclaim to me that they said, that the game was longer than they thought it was going to be, or just saying, wow, that was a long game or something.
It was definitely longer than I expected it to be, but it didn't drag for me. Like, the evolution of that game's plot, I guess, the narrative of it just keeps going and escalating in a way that like really dragged me along in a good way.
I'm very interested to see what the plan was. I basically just went to the leader of the corporation's office, and so that's kind of
you're getting to that point where things are just going to start escalating and questions will be answered in a way that a lot of games don't like to lay it all out there for you, but this game definitely does.
Yeah, and of course
it doesn't leave all that for a sequel, which is good.
Yeah, and Captain Zavala, I get to talk to him. He's got a great voice. I thought he did a really good job in Break. Lance Reddick, the guy. But anyway, he's a fun voice actor.
Yeah.
Anyway, Ryan, I interrupted you. I'm sorry, man. What were you going to say?
You were talking about collectibles. I remember some of the vistas being really cool. That was all I was going to say.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
They are visually cool, but yeah, I got kind of tired of those.
Not all of them, but a couple of them, yeah. It's like you get to the vista and you're like, wow, this environment looks great. And then you kind of move on, take a screenshot or two.
Yeah.
If you're like me.
Gotcha.
So I had a question for you.
Yeah.
Well, I guess you and I kind of more or less put the cherry on top of Orcs Must Die Unchained. Were there any closing thoughts and epitaph of sorts that you would like to share on that?
Well, I never really got a chance to hear what your response was to the review I wrote. I don't know if that seemed harsh or unfair, but I guess I'd still be interested in trying some of the endless modes. But I guess to me, to very briefly summarize the review, it's like my favorite thing about Orcs Must Die, or my favorite things about Orcs Must Die, were somewhat semi-undermined by those particular design decisions that were made in this iteration.
Yeah, well, I mean, I thought maybe your review, I think your Steam review, you said you felt like it was a 6 out of 10, and that might have been a little down on it, but I definitely agree that, and the parallel that comes to my mind actually is the first Destiny. And there are definitely some differences, some nuances, but the first Destiny, I was on the hype train, I played the beta, and I played it through like the first expansion or two, and it's a game that had that incredibly fun core, but that was constantly frustrated by development decisions, design decisions, and kind of customer unfriendly business decisions.
Right.
And it felt needless. It's like, guys, you didn't have to ruin the lore of this game. Like, you didn't have to, put in vanity items as microtransactions, but like, don't waffle around on DLCs and make this painful, repetitive content. Like, those are some of the things I felt about the first Destiny, and in different areas, but in a similar sense. Like Orcs Must Die Unchained, it had that kind of core co-op tower defense experience with tons of humor and tons of charm, and some new ideas that were really cool, like the new heroes, like the way that they kind of balanced. But then, like, everything was behind loot boxes, like trap upgrades, vanity items that made me like not want to pay for anything.
Right.
And yeah, like the game was obviously designed as a MOBA, which, I mean, it may have contributed to some of those interesting ideas they had in there, but then like they had things like you couldn't restart your games, like, it just was obviously not designed for like a single player or, local co-op or, party co-op experience. It was designed around that kind of always multiplayer experience, and it ended up being a ton of fun, and we played it for a long time. It's just it's and I don't want to be as harsh on Robot as Bungie, because I think Bungie's a AAA studio and they really dropped the ball, and it took them a long time to fix the issues. Robot is a smaller studio, and you could see they were definitely trying to course correct.
Right.
But yeah, I mean,
yeah,
I think we share some of those same frustrations.
With the first Destiny, I always felt like the goal was to make you to basically create something that you would play until the second Destiny. And I guess like, and I kind of like, I guess that just annoyed me. It's like, well, no, there are other things I want to play, Bungie. Okay, there are other things I want to do. But I guess it's interesting. Jim Sterling, a critic that I kind of follow, he did a recent his recent Jimquisition, which is sort of his weekly show. I don't know if it was the last one or the one before, but he did one where basically he said, how to do free to play right, like how to do this correct. And so I guess, just for any listeners who are out there, in my view, the best two games I've played that do this are, I would say, Path of Exile has got to be one of them, and also probably Card Hunter. I thought did really, really good jobs with that model, encouraging you to spend money in a meaningful way, but not gating certain things and not making you feel like you needed to pay to win or anything like that. So, just in terms of like, what does this look like when it's done right? I think that those two developers did a really great job.
Yeah, that's part of it too. Is I feel like there are free to play models that have worked for me, but loot boxing everything, including your vanity items, I basically didn't buy any vanity items for that game because, if I want a skin and it costs $5, maybe that's expensive. Maybe I'm okay with it, but I'm not going to pay $5 for a 1 in 30 chance to get what I want.
Yeah, and you could actually get you could get dyes and skins for characters that you didn't even own. Yeah. Which is just lame.
Yeah, it's like, well, thanks. So I guess I had a couple games I wanted to talk about, and I guess we might wrap it up.
Mm-hmm.
Well, depending on how long-winded I am. So the two things I wanted to mention, I'll mention Fire Emblem Echoes again because I am pretty far along in that. I don't really have a lot to add from our last podcast, so I'm still enjoying it. I do think their storytelling is better than some of the other entries in the Fire Emblem series. Mm-hmm. So far, I've enjoyed that about it. I guess where they based it off Gaiden, it has a number of class changes and changes with the way the item system are handled that I think are different enough to make it an interesting entry in the Fire Emblem series. There's some ability to grind in that game, which I've been doing. It's not the most fun thing in the world. So once
I feel like you have to, though.
Maybe a little. I'm playing it on hard.
Okay, yeah,
and maybe a little bit because some of the missions are pretty hard. I'm not sure I would want to go into it, but I'm going a little overkill on it. So that's not entirely the game's fault, but it has been a bit tedious. So anyway, I guess I'll see if anything changes, but overall I've been enjoying.
Do you have a sense, like, are you near the end, or are you still in the middle of the game? Or
yeah, I think I'm closing in on the final act or two, probably like the last act of the game. It's a little hard to say because they could definitely extend it, but I know I have gone through some pretty big events within the game.
Yeah.
So, and then the big thing I wanted to talk about was XCOM 2: War of the Chosen.
Yeah, I want to hear about this one.
Yeah, so that's I picked it up. I was pretty excited about it. I ended up playing through a campaign on veteran difficulty, which is kind of it's one of the lower difficulties, I think. There's veteran, commander, legendary, or something like that. Legend. So I ended up hitting one of the easier difficulties just to feel it out. I did start a commander Iron Man. That's a funny story all in of itself. Awesome. Overall, though, I mean, basically the TLDR to that game is it's a DLC. Like,
that's the impression I got. But I also got the impression that it's a really, really big DLC.
Yeah, like I heard people saying this was kind of like, or some reviewers kind of saying this was like an XCOM 3, and it really is not.
Okay. So they were lying to us, is what you're saying.
It's a DLC that kind of layers on content. And so, I mean, it has some new ideas, and like, they're fun new ideas. Like, I don't want to say, that I didn't enjoy it, but it's more XCOM 2. Like, it's a DLC. Yeah.
I guess I felt like with the first one, I just want to kind of ask you a question here. Like, I ended up purchasing the DLC for the first game, or not the first game, but, Enemy Unknown. Mm-hmm. And then I started playing it, and I guess I realized I was like, does Fire Access think that this is like Civilization? Like that they can like throw in something else? Like, because to me, a Civilization game is sort of a separate, more, I don't know, sort of personalized experience. And XCOM, although there are some missions in there that are kind of random which directions you go, it actually feels like it has more of a story. So like when I started to try and play through XCOM Enemy Within, which isn't really a thing, it's just sort of extra stuff. It kind of felt like I was playing through the same game that I already played through, but with the knowledge that there were a couple of extra missions thrown in the middle.
Yeah.
And that really didn't push me. I actually didn't end up playing it. and didn't really push me forward. So I don't know, is this the same type of thing? Do you feel like you're playing a different game, or how does it feel, I guess, or how's it structured? I guess I don't know much about it.
Yeah, and maybe I should talk a little bit about that. But yeah, that first point I wanted to make is basically it feels kind of like what you're saying. It feels like they took XCOM 2 and kind of put some new things on top of it. Like they didn't really like take much out or rebalance much. It's mostly additive. And the campaign is longer. Like it is a longer campaign. So and
XCOM 2 was already pretty long. Like it was longer than Enemy Unknown from what I remember.
Yeah, so you take that long XCOM 2 campaign and you add in like basically another mini campaign like right in the middle of it. So that's we'll get back to that. So yeah, like they added in like a number of things, and I mean some of the ideas I really like. Like they added this propaganda thing. So like when you do missions, like they have propaganda dialogue from like the speaker and the Advent reporters and all them. Plus they take posters of like different events, and you can take your own posters, like you can pose your soldiers and things like that, but the game also automatically does it like when you win a mission or when a soldier dies or things like that. Like they'll automatically kind of create a poster. And they'll put those in the mission maps, which is kind of neat, but they definitely added some kind of neat flavor type things to the game. They added I don't want to go into a comprehensive list. These are just a few highlights.
Sure, yeah.
They added the ability for your soldiers to form bonds, which is kind of like it's kind of there in a way. Like it's not overwhelmingly powerful, but it does create some kind of neat situations, and the gameplay mechanics they put into that, actually a lot of those make sense. So like if one soldier shoots at or is shot at by an enemy, their bond mate will have like a 10% aim bonus against that enemy.
Gotcha.
And so that actually did create some kind of fun stories. Like I had a ranger and a grenadier, like a demolitions expert, who worked together a lot. And so a lot of times I would have my demolitions expert like blow the cover out of two aliens and do some damage to them. And then my ranger could come in and she would get an aim bonus to attacking one of those enemies.
Gotcha.
So it's not they didn't make like a huge gameplay mechanic, but they did make some kind of smart like choices for that mechanic. There are the new classes, which they explore some interesting ideas like stealth and melee. That's pretty fun. They've added some like unique weapons that you get for achieving certain things. And they made a really smart change to the Advanced Warfare Center in the old game could kind of give your soldiers random new abilities. But they've changed that mechanic in a really smart way that lets you kind of control how that works, as opposed to it just randomly giving your, ranger double tap or blast padding or whatever.
Right. That was one thing about XCOM 2 that I thought was a kind of a strange design choice from them, was that they made a lot more random effects and outcomes than were in Enemy Unknown. And I think they were trying to make it more replayable and like different every time, kind of like what Will was saying earlier, where Civ, each game feels very different, but Enemy Unknown maybe not so much. So I think they were trying to do some of that with XCOM 2, but I think that could be also really frustrating when you were like on your heels trying to fight this revolution against your alien overlords, and then it's like, oh, I'm getting all this crap out of the random events.
Yeah, and that's actually that would be one of my complaints with the DLC. And again, this is something I enjoyed, and like it has a lot of flavor, but it definitely felt like more XCOM, and it felt like more XCOM 2, and like in a way that was like more complicated and like replaying the same campaign with added elements. Like I feel like this would have been better if they had cut out parts of the original campaign, or maybe cut back some of the original mechanics. So either have a highly complex but shorter DLC campaign that's kind of unique, like, or balance it out again, like rebalance it out, and not just add 3 new soldiers. Because if you think about the specs, like old XCOM basically had 9 different soldier specs you fitting into 6 slots. Well, now you have 3 new soldier types, and they a lot of times have more than 2 ability paths. Like, they have very flexible ability paths, so you have to figure out. And then they added mechanics like fatigue. They added things like negative traits that your soldiers can randomly pick up. They added these sit reps, which are random modifiers that can happen to mission maps. And I mean, it's kind of fun in a random sort of way. Like, and the Chosen are basically like a mini boss campaign they've stuck, and they can show up randomly in any mission. Mm-hmm. So, that's a lot of randomness. And I mean, they power you up in certain ways. So maybe it balances out, but in a very much more risk and randomness type way, which is going to, and basically like, and I was kind of suspicious. Like, I was like, okay, well, I think maybe this campaign is balanced, but there's going to be a lot more randomness to it. So I was enjoying it. I mean, I enjoyed XCOM 2 enough to play 2 campaigns. So I was enjoying War of the Chosen, partly because it's more XCOM 2. So I started, after I finished my veteran playthrough, I started an Iron Man on Commander. And, I was struggling through, like, it has a lot of the normal XCOM, like, challenges and unluckiness that you have to deal with. But then I got to a mission where I was doing a retaliation strike. So if you're familiar with those, like, usually soldiers are killing, enemy soldiers are killing civilians. And usually you have to kind of rush in and kill these enemy soldiers. So they're pretty challenging to begin with. Well, so I had lost a soldier. I had brought a squad of 5 because I was in the mid game. And I had lost 1 soldier because of an unlucky crit. But I had killed basically all of the enemies. So I was feeling pretty good. Like, I had 4 soldiers. Everything was about dead. I kept a lot of the civilians alive. Well, then one of the Chosen shows up, and he basically, within 4 turns, he takes a free action to stun one of my guys, and he does that once, but then he stunned my my medic with a free action that he gets. Then he took free grapples and basically used flanking sniper shots on 4 different guys, 4 different turns, and basically one-shotted all 4 of my guys, like in 4 consecutive turns. And I mean, considering that I was fighting aliens, I don't want to say that, like, I'm a strategic mastermind or anything, but it was really hard to control for that situation. And since he put my medic down, like, I couldn't, like, it's just, and so I spent a turn reviving my medic, but he came back disoriented, which means he couldn't heal. So, like, there's all these random effects on, like, how, this powerful enemy AI, like, sometimes they'll just noodle around, daze your soldiers, like, use these abilities that are easy to dodge. And sometimes, like, they'll just use, grappling hooks to flank your soldiers and basically one-shot them. Like, it's stuff that's hard to control. So, I don't want to beat the game up too much. Like, it was fun. Like, it was XCOM, but it's fun, and, like, they experimented with some new ideas. They added a lot of content. They added a lot of randomness. Like, you have to kind of play it with a grain of salt. It does not feel like, if this were XCOM 3, I would want them to balance the campaign. Like you mentioned Civilization, like Sid Meier, actually, it was interesting. I watched him discussing kind of the game design that went into Civilization, and he says, for all the new ideas that we put in, we take something out. And I feel like with, this War of the Chosen, that's not the design philosophy they went with. So it's fun, but it can be a little overwhelming.
It sounds like the game suffers from some bloat, which I felt like XCOM 2 already had some of that. They just pile a bunch of stuff on top.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say, like, I like the XCOM campaign story, but because they added it on, like, you basically you have to stop the Chosen. Like, I guess technically you don't have to, but they're a big part of your campaign and the DLC. So I did that in my first playthrough. I stopped all of them, and then I had to do all of the story missions from the original campaign, and that was actually very tedious.
Yeah.
Like, okay, now I got to skulljack a codex. Now I gotta hit this facility, Like you just have to keep doing missions over and over, and it ends up being pretty drawn out. So yeah, hopefully not too long-winded. There's a lot of things you could talk about. I mean, I haven't talked about all the features. They did put tons and tons of stuff in there. Overall, I guess the TLDR is that it's a fun kind of add-on DLC that makes the game longer and more complicated. And I really think they could have benefited from, but it's a DLC, right? They can do that. Like,
I think
kind of common for a DLC.
I think what I would really want from a newer XCOM game, or another stab at it if they do it, would be for them to constrain it down some. Like, I guess there's two ways you could go. You could go like, oh, this is a story game that you're going to play through, and you're going to have a story about your soldiers that you get during this campaign, and maybe some crazy stuff happens along the way, and then you finish it. Or it could be a game that's more focused on like those random elements and like, swinging between like devastating loss and huge victories. And like, oh, well, this game I got this technology, so now I'm changing my whole play style, right? But I would want that to be a shorter game. Yeah,
that's. I agree. Yeah, like it can. I think if War of the Chosen had like a shorter campaign or cut out some of the main campaign, that could be fun, because then I wouldn't feel so bad about losing my Iron Man, right? If it's a 10, 15 hour, 20-hour campaign, like that's still pretty long. But
yeah, I just looked up my Steam time for XCOM 2, and it's like 40 hours.
Oh, what was that? You cut out for a second. Uh-oh.
The internet in Wendell, I mean, what are you going to do,
It's really good, guys.
Okay, there we go. Okay, so what was your Steam time? You left us all hanging.
Yeah, I left you on the cliff there. My Steam time for XCOM 2 says 40 hours, which is probably a lot of idle time, but that's still really long.
Yeah, I think across 2 campaigns I had 50 or 60 hours.
Yeah, like I probably actually played it for like in the low 30s, but that was one playthrough.
Yeah, like you can easily spend 20, 30 hours on an XCOM 2 campaign. And like you said, Nate, I feel like if they took stuff out and made a balanced campaign, which, this isn't XCOM 3, so I don't want to beat them up too much for making a DLC. But I also want to emphasize that it is not XCOM 3. It's not like a more balanced experience in any way.
Okay.
But yeah, I feel like in a future iteration, maybe they could take some of these ideas and take a few things out, make something balanced. Or like you said, they can add in all the wacky,
Yeah, I'd be totally fine with an XCOM game with randomness turned up to 11. If it was a 10-hour game.
Yeah, 10 hours, exactly. Like that could feel fun in a way. You could play 2 or 3 campaigns, and if you lost one, because it's a challenging game, like I don't want to complain about the challenge. That's one of the appeals of XCOM. It's just that when the challenge is a lot of randomness, you got a bad sit rep, the Chosen decided to show up and he decided to use his mind control ability instead of his goofy like Daze ability, like that stuff is hard to control for. So well, I think, unless you guys have any more questions about XCOM, I will /end rant there.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I think I'm good. I was really interested in that game before it came out, and it seemed like the reactions were positive. So it's interesting to hear maybe a slightly less positive take on it.
Yeah, there were things I liked about it for sure, and it was cool to see them experiment with some new ideas. But there were also things that they did that I was less positive on. And I will stop there.
No, that's fine. That's been taking up most of your time?
I spent a big chunk of the last couple weeks doing that. I've been playing Hollow Knight and Echoes as well. Those are kind of my other big gaming ventures that I didn't talk about, or that I already talked about.
Right.
Cool. Well, anyone else got anything on the table? I think we were going to skip news for today.
Yeah, that might be a podcast.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know. I guess in the near future, probably going to try and knock out all of those Destiny strikes. If those strikes get my light level enough to play the raid, then I'll play the raid. Maybe if somebody knows how to do it. Otherwise, I guess I won't. Probably going to play some more Horizon Zero Dawn. Maybe an endless Orcs Must Die Unchained match with Mr. Ryan. Mm-hmm. But that's probably what's coming up.
Cool.
Mm-hmm. How about here's a fun note. Hang on, let me give you guys one more fun note. So we've been playing. Jeannie, my wife, has never played D&D before.
All right,
we've been playing D&D with this DM named Dave, who's a friend of ours, who's like 45, 46 or something, and so we've been playing first edition.
Nice.
Which is completely weird.
Yeah.
And like there are classes and races mixed. So you can either play as a fighter or an elf, like those are classes. But Jeannie's never played before, and so she's like, I want to make someone that's like Brienne of Tarth from Game of Thrones, who is this sort of like enormous knight blonde woman. And the rest of us have just been sucking in like every single encounter. But Jeannie's character named Brienne, the fighter, has been absolutely obliterating, and it's uncanny. It's uncanny. So I've killed maybe one hobgoblin the whole time we've been playing, as I've been playing this little halfling, and she has probably killed like 9 enemies in the time that it took me to kill this one. And she doesn't just kill them, because she rolls a D10 for this giant 2-handed sword. So she just like chops them in half. Like it is insane. And so I thought that you guys might find that amusing.
Oh yeah, totally.
Sounds like fighters good at fighting.
Yeah, the little I know about first edition D&D is that like some of the math is weird, and that like if you have a campaign or an adventure that's mostly combat, then like everybody but the fighter is just useless.
Yeah, it's my AC is 3.
Yeah,
so that whatever that means.
Yeah, there's one version of D&D, and I don't know if it's first or not, but there's one version where low AC is better.
I think that's that one.
Okay,
that one. Yeah, and so like they have to roll I think they have to roll like a 17 to hit me. Mm-hmm. Which I guess, so it's kind of like if you roll, I guess if you have like a 1 AC, then they'd have to roll a 19 to hit you.
Something like that, yeah.
So it's something like that. But anyway,
that's funny.
It's been a hoot.
I love a good tabletop RPG story anytime.
Gotcha. But yeah, so that's what I'm playing.
Cool.
What are you guys getting into next?
So Nate, how about you?
I'll definitely be playing a lot more Hollow Knight, Mario and Rabbids. I really want to get a new game that just came out, Heat Signature, from the guy who made Gunpoint. Mm-hmm. Okay. I don't know when I'll get around to that, but that's something I definitely want to get to. And I guess in the realm of tabletop games, I am still running a D&D group, so that continues, and we are starting a game of the Sprawl that Ryan joined in on our first game, and we should be getting Will into the next one, hopefully.
Yeah.
So that'll be fun.
Sounds good. For me, also be running Hollow Knight and Fire Emblem Echoes. After that, I'm not sure. I might spin up some of the Famicom games I bought earlier. I kind of want to do like maybe even like a Let's Play style recording of some of those old FDS games, which I think could be fun. And most of those are shortish, so kind of on my short list to do that. But alternatively, there's some other 2017 games I've had my eye on that I might try to get to first. So
All right.
We'll see where that road goes.
Well, cool. It's been real.
Sure has.
So, thanks for joining us. to our esteemed podcasters, Nate and Will, and to all our international listeners out there. This has been ATACS episode 22.